Welcome to Invested, where we spotlight trailblazing female founders and their investable ventures. I'm your host, Margaret Winiger, and join me as we dive into data-driven stories with watchlist-worthy entrepreneurs, revealing the insights and tactics behind their startup success. Whether you're an investor looking for a high-growth potential startup, a founder looking for guidance, or you just love a great story, this is the show for you. I'm joined today by the founder of Luster.ai, Christina Brady. Backed by the high alpha venture firm, Luster leverages AI to identify and bridge skill gaps in customer-facing reps before they impact your customers. In their first 3 months, Luster generated over $100,000 in revenue and saw a 43% increase in their NPS score. The ROI has been almost immediate. 2 separate customers have already seen record-setting ramp times for new account executive hires. In this episode, we talk about Luster's early traction, how focus will be key in a virtually unlimited addressable market, and why Christina Brady is uniquely equipped to make Luster the next unicorn.
Hello and welcome, Christina. It is so wonderful to have you on Invested.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're going to fangirl all over you, but first, we're going to start with the rapid fire to hear the juicy, sexy metrics of Luster. So you ready?
I'm so ready for that. Hit me with it.
Okay. All right. So for context, Luster officially made their product available in July of 2024. So about 3.5 months in. How many customers do you have?
We already have 7 companies that are customers.
Amazing. And ARR?
We passed the $100,000 mark.
And adoption metrics, what are you seeing with your customers who have signed on?
One of the exciting things that we've seen is a lot of our customers initially came in and we wanted to run smaller pilots with them, right? It's AI technology, it's brand new, and realism is the name of the game with this, as our analytics. And so getting hands-on, everyone wanted to start really, really small, but almost every customer that we have onboarded within the first couple of weeks has expanded to additional licenses. So not only are their teams using Luster to practice in every single week, but then we are seeing them say like, hey, the 10 pilot reps are going really, really well. Everybody wants a license now. Or like, we want to use this for onboarding. We want to use this for ramping reps, or we just rolled out a new product. Like, can we use this for the team that just has to sell that new product? And so we're seeing adoption of initial users. And then we're also seeing expansion within existing customers, but really quickly.
Nice. Okay. And then, so average contract value.
Right now, an annualized agreement for us is looking to be between around 60 to 80,000. And we are targeting, I would say, upper SMB, lower mid-market companies. Think employees of like 20 to 500 as a sweet spot. We can certainly serve bigger than that or smaller than that. But the problem that we solve and the gaps that we identify are so critical for that sort of series seed to B company.
And then tell us about Luster. So, what was the problem that you identified in the market? And then what is the solution that you're presenting to address that problem?
One of the things that's a little bit unique about me as a founder is I'm not a typical product founder or engineering founder. I'm a salesperson, right? Like, I've been a salesperson for 17 years. I started my career as an account executive, a full cycle AE before there were BDRs, and worked my way up to CRO before jumping in and solving a problem for salespeople as a former salesperson. And so the problem that I always felt was, one, ingrainment of skills was really hard to achieve, really hard to measure. And I had an inability as a sales rep, sales manager, director, VP, CRO to be able to identify proactively where are the skill proficiencies or deficiencies of my team about to impact my revenue, about to impact my customers, my brand. Could never see those metrics until after the fact, until that sort of long tail metric of we didn't hit our targets, or our velocity is down, or our win rate is dropping, or we're losing to competitors and we don't know why. And then we'd have to do this 6-month retro to go back and be like, what was the problem subjectively? And oh, by the way, we didn't have the data before the problem, and we certainly don't have the data after the problem. So let's hire someone to come in for 6 months and uncover it. And by the time we find the issue, the environment has changed, the market has changed, the customers have changed, and everything changes. So even the data that we have isn't relevant anymore. And so Luster sought out to, one, solve for the skill ingrainment problem by utilizing Gen AI for practice, but then also to, since we are measuring individual contributors at that level, we're able to actually create a proficiency map for every customer-facing employee in the organization, we can then use that proficiency map to look at the actual calls and interactions they have on their calendar, proactively predict where they're about to make mistakes, and then close those knowledge, skill, behavior gaps with things like practice or training or coaching before they do. And so the idea of Luster is give the crystal ball to go to market teams so they can actually predict their business accurately, which is something that no one had been able to do prior. And so we're solving a big problem, but I'm solving a problem that I had, right? It's selfish.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like so far customers have been, I mean, we're set, adoption metrics are an expansion is very early indicators are positive. You're also seeing really early positive indicators in your NPS. Tell me about your NPS score.
So NPS is kind of a quirky beast, right? Because it's so subjective and it goes off of like however many people respond. But our NPS started out of the gate when we first started pulling our customers at their 6-week check-ins. Our NPS was around 14. And so we were happy as a startup tech product, especially in the AI space, to have a positive NPS at all. Like we were expecting, we're like, it's probably going to be like a negative 30, but we're going to only go up from there. But it started at 14 and it's actually only gone up and to the right. And so it's only been a couple of weeks since initial 6-week check-ins, but we've already gotten the NPS up to 20 and we're aiming to get that a little bit higher and hopefully in the 30s by the end of the year.
All right. That is the end of rapid fire. And we're going to shift a little bit more into some hearing a little bit more about Luster, hearing a little bit more about you, Christina, and just thinking about this space that you're in and what you're seeing as you're going into it. You know, again, the addressable market is massive. But there's also there's players in this space, right? You know, back in, you know, the mid 2015s, 2018s, you've got Gong and Chorus that were kind of the first ones to do something similar, right? Of after a conversation has happened, being able to provide data and analytics. As you're thinking about how to have Luster stand out in a market where there's a lot of players coming at similar problems, you know, with their different platforms. How are you positioning yourself to kind of uniquely differentiate, just knowing that this is a space that a lot of tech companies tend to triangulate and want to build products to solve for the similar problems?
There's how do we build a product to solve a problem? And then there's, do I have a fundamental understanding of the problem that earns me the right to build a product? And so on our end, one of the core differentiators that we have is simply myself, my co-founding team, all of us are starting with the end in mind in terms of what is the problem that we are solving and why, and where does it show up and what does that look like? And if we're going to build a product to solve that problem, what does it actually need to be? And so I think a lot of people, even if you look at us and you put us in the AI role play space, right, which would be totally fair, I think there's a lot of companies that are building a really beautiful AI point solution, right? And it's AI role play, which is an amazing UI that is fenced and useful, that is sitting on top of an LLM. And our AI role play tool is that too, by the way. Like that is how you build it. And on that end, there's a race to who can build the best mousetrap, who's going to build the best AI role play product that has good latency and feels realistic and is easy to use and has a beautiful UI, right? But we don't necessarily want to compete there because, again, for me, I am not starting with the product in mind. I am starting with the problem in mind. And the problem is I can't see the proficiency of my team in real time and understand how that proficiency or lack thereof is about to impact my revenue. And so where there's a lot of other companies in this space that are advertising like we have 5,000 users, we've done 20,000 practice sessions. I'm like, in 6 weeks, we've prevented 2,000 revenue impacting mistakes with paid customers. Like, that is the problem, right? Is like, why are we practicing? What are we practicing? How are we using that data? How are we actually helping to solve the gaps that we are identifying? Because practice is a great way to learn. It's not the only way to learn. So how are we involving a hybrid of people and AI? How are we making enablement professionals feel empowered and feel like they can actually track and measure the training and curriculum and programs they put on? How are we helping sales managers go into every one-on-one with a prescription for coaching that individual and then trackable, measurable results? So for us, again, it's the problem, it's not the product. And so that to us is kind of our moat and where we are going to continue to focus. And so our product roadmap and what we build is naturally going to look very, very different than a lot of solutions. And for us, the customers that are a fit for the problem that we're solving will find their way to us. And the folks that are like, we kind of just need that like quick, zippy point solution role play, like, love that. You could buy Luster, but like there's these other companies that are a great fit for you as well. And you should explore those. And the other thing that is just a little bit funny is, you know, when you have all of these companies that are coming to market and competing in the same place, there's naturally going to be 3 or 4 of those that emerge and stand the test of time, and the rest will sort of kind of dissolve off. And so for us, it's, yeah, are we aiming to be the best of the best of the best? Like, sure. I care more about getting the right customers and making them happy and building that loyalty. And then we will win if we do that in whatever way works for us. And we've already seen some competitors that have started to like copy our messaging and things. So I'm like, you know what? If they're copying us, they're behind us, and that feels really, really good. And so we're just focused on our customers and doing the right thing for them and listening to them and hoping that the rest kind of falls into place.
You know, you said something, and I want to come back to it around, you know, the kind of the tangible impact of your product, because to your point, right, training budgets have shrunk. I saw a statistic that I think just training in general across an entire company, so not sales specific, but training, has gone from 8% to 2% in the last 20 years, which is just abysmal. So, you know, what's interesting is that this isn't a training solution. This is something that directly impacts information around proficiency that's going to affect your reps' ability to bring in revenue. It sounds like you've already been able to track some quantifiable ROI for your product. Will you tell us a little bit about some of the early wins you're seeing from an ROI perspective?
Yeah. I mean, one, for us to have the ability to say that we've prevented 2,000 plus revenue impacting mistakes, that comes down to us being able to measure proficiency at the individual rep level and then put that up against calendar, right? And how many times have we done that and identified, hey, and that prospecting call and that discovery call and that demo call, right? Like with that, like you are about to make a mistake. We're going to stop that before it actually happens. So actually seeing that in real time is meaningful. We've also found that it doesn't have to take as long as you think that it does. Like the average role play session with 2 human beings is like 20 to 30 minutes. We have found that with Luster, with only 18 minutes of practice per week, we have seen skill improvement up to 38% on individual skills. And so by having focused practice that is hitting on your need right now, you can actually be way more efficient. So the data feeding the practice and the learning is actually helping it to be more efficient. We have had 2 companies that have said when they have deployed Luster with their brand new hire class, both of them have had account executives that are using Luster that have closed a deal faster than company history, right? And so they're reaching out to us and they're like, oh my gosh, we just deployed this tool and now we're breaking records in terms of our speed to revenue or speed to close date for our newly hired employees. Like that is an incredible data point. So now we're looking at like, can we cut down ramp times? But no one knows what their actual ramp time is right now. Like you ask any company, like, what's your ramp time? They're like, well, we don't really know the numerator or the denominator. So we're helping companies figure that out. Like, well, what does your ramp look like? And how do we get there quicker? And what do they have to learn? And hey, guess what? What would it be like if you never came out of another training class with people in different roles saying, I didn't feel like that was specific for me? Because with a tool like this, it can be. You can actually practice and learn in your sphere of genius, whether you're a BDR or an AE or a quota carrying CSM or a growth AE, whatever you are, you can actually have practice at the very, very beginning that feels really specific to your role. We're seeing wins in terms of hiring, right? Like we're able to hire people with this tool because we can measure their proficiency before they even start. We had one rep that reached out to us and said they practiced a very specific call before they went on it. So they had a call on their calendar and we basically cloned, who are you talking to? What is the scenario? We got kind of the deep dive of everything that had happened previously. And the rep came to us and said, I practiced that call before I went on it. And I went on that call and I one call closed it. And I've never one call closed anything in my life. And you could say there's a lot of factors that would go into that. But the fact that this individual is like, my ability to have that call before I have it and focus on where I was going to be weak just brought me success. Like those qualitative wins are huge. You want your people feeling confident before they get on a call. So I could go on all day, but just having this product in market for 3 months and having these kinds of wins, it feels good. It like makes my sales rep heart so happy.
Oh, I bet. Well, and something that's really interesting, we were talking about this before we hit record is, you know, the market size is a little bit difficult to quantify here because this is a situation where it could literally be any organization that has a customer facing role. So tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about this is a massive addressable market in theory. How are you thinking about this addressable market and where is Luster going to make its mark?
You're so right. Because when we were first talking about, like, okay, what's our TAM? Like, let's outline our white space. And we were like, well, if we draw a broad stroke, that would be any customer facing employee at any organization that needs to make sure that they're saying the right thing at the right time and following the right process to get the right result. And we were like, well, that's huge. And as a startup, we can't come out of the gate like every other startup and say, everyone needs this. So for us, it's been about focus. And how do we focus on doing one or two things for one specific type of customer really, really well and get repeatability there? And then how do we get some of those initial really wonderful metrics? Like, how do we get revenue growth? How do we get expansion? How do we get a lack of churn? How do we get high NPS? How do we get win rate, right? Are we winning against competitors? Is our messaging very, very clear? Where's our attribution? How are we meeting our customers? And how are we building the product and the roadmap to serve a really specific customer? And so for us, we've been focused on finding product market fit. And where that's naturally settled for us is, we kind of mentioned like the company size.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of went in with B2B technology companies, company size like 20 to 500 as the sweet spot, and starting with the sales teams. So the account executives, the BDRs, we're now kind of getting into client success managers and CS. But the idea there is companies of that size, of which I have worked at for almost my entire career, are really strapped for learning and development resources. They're really strapped for data resources. You have a lot of people wearing a lot of hats. Every customer conversation you have at that level is unbelievably important. You can't be affording to burn bridges. And so the need for a tool that allows ingrainment of skills and also proactive identification of revenue impacting mistakes is big. And so we hyper focused there, and we are focusing the product on stability, security, and building additional elements and features of the product slowly to ensure that we are nailing them before we do that. So one tactic is you can build a whole bunch of use cases out of the gate all at once. And with AI, it makes it really easy to do that. And while the product may not be stable or, secure, you can just go patch that later after you've got thousands of people using it. I've worked at a company that made that mistake before. And so I've already learned that lesson of, like, if you don't build a stable product the right way out of the gate, you are going to have a massive amount of churn on the back end. And so it's been those exercises of hyper focus and doing the right thing.
Well, let's talk about that. I alluded to it at the very beginning, and I think it's worth talking about. Your, for lack of a better term, pedigree is unmatched when it comes to the brands you've worked for. Glassdoor, you've worked for Groupon, you've been on the other side, to your point, on the training side at Sales Assembly, companies that are now very large, well known, but you've been at them during phases of growth. Talk to us about your experience within companies, tech companies, and like really helping to kind of build and scale the sales organizations. How did you go about doing it? Tell us any and all that you can.
Oh my gosh. One of the things that I learned that I tell people all the time is there is a playbook for sales. There is not necessarily a playbook for client success and customer success. Like, I have not seen an organization where there isn't some element of a custom build. And that comes from me working on both sides of the fence for 4 different companies. And so there's this idea, one, of like, there is a playbook that you can utilize for some organizations and some roles, for the most part, like an 80% skeleton, but you're going to have to custom build your CS team and determine, like, what are the roles and how are they measured and who are they and how many people and what does implementation look like? Like, you can get advice on what other people have done, but if it feels like you're like, man, we're having to kind of custom build this and do our own thing, that is correct, because your company is unique, your customer is unique. So, like, embrace that and go off of what has worked well, but don't be afraid to say, like, look, this structure worked at a company that I was at previously and it doesn't work now. But what was interesting is, so I was at Groupon very, very early on. And when I say early on for Groupon, it was like I joined when there were like 600 employees. Like, but that was early for Groupon, which by the time I left, 20,000 employees by the time I left. So that massive growth. And that was my first foray into, I started there. I'd had a sales role prior in insurance, but that was my first tech sales role. And it was wild, wild west in the best possible way. I mean, this was like the baby stages of tech. We're talking 2009, 2010 in Chicago. This was like the first mega giant in Chicago that was there. And I got to experience being promoted up from, a beginning AE to a mid-market AE to an enterprise AE. And the whole time I'm managing my book while I'm selling. And then I moved into frontline leadership and then second line leadership. And I was able to be a part of the company going from private to going to public. We went through 3 CEOs while I was there, right? Like all of this change and like a lot of trying new products, and they failed. Like one of the jobs that I had there toward the very end was I was running pilot teams. And so the whole idea for Groupon at that time was, let's spin up go to market within go to market, run it for 6 to 8 months and see if we can get new ideas for the company out of that. And if we get a new idea that we can sell and become a part of like the regular SKU, awesome. And there's still things that I did that my team implemented that Groupon does today. And that's cool. There's other things that were like a massive, massive, very expensive mistake, which at the time when it was like, can we throw $6 million at this? And it's like, but what if we make no money? It's like, well, that'll be a good learning for us, right? That's what it's like when you're working with a unicorn company that has millions and millions in very deep pockets. Going to Glassdoor, it was a private acquisition experience that I had there after 2 years. And it was starting an office and hiring from the ground up. And you're in temporary spaces and you're doing things like leading the global growth team from 8 to 80 million, but then also making sure that everyone has lunch every day. So like you're doing all these like weird things there. And then going to sales assembly. And that was a much smaller company where they had to pivot from being this in-person learning organization to what is now a global virtual learning environment with so many different offerings for organizations. So kind of making that journey and then going over to Speckit, which was like enablement technology, a Series B company that had some hardship in the past and it was a bit of a recovery story. So I've been able to tap through various stages of, by the time I was at, Speckit, I was in a CRO capacity. When I started at Groupon, I was an AE that had never sold tech. And I got a booklet that was this thick as to like how to sell, right? So it's been a wild journey and I've taken every piece of it with me where I am now.
I mean, it really is just an incredible background with an incredible set of skills and experiences that position you so well to build your own company. I think one of the things that I also know about you, and I'd love to talk about, is you have had to have tremendous resiliency throughout your career. And like you said, you're self-made, right? There's nothing for you to fall back on. You have built this incredible career, but that also you have faced some very challenging setbacks. Let's talk about resiliency for you, times in your life where you've had to use it. How do you think about it? How do you tap into it when you're facing, things outside your control that are presenting as headwinds?
It's such a wonderful question. And I would love to say that I have always navigated every hardship with grace. I've always looked really good while I've done it. But like the reality is, I've spent so much hardship just feeling like a troll or a goblin. Like maybe today I'll crawl out of the garbage can and talk to somebody, which when you're going through hardship, that is the win. One of my life mottos, it's always right here behind me, is this concept of make it mean something. And it's that everybody goes through hardship that feels unimaginable. And you feel like this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing that takes me out. There's a phrase that I love that is everything is always okay in the end. And if it's not okay, then it's not the end. And for me, I've drawn on a lot of trauma from my very early life. So folks who know my story know that after losing my parents in my childhood home very early on in my early 20s, I had a period of homelessness and truly losing everything. And when I say homelessness, I don't mean like I was on the street begging. Thank God. I was in college and I was couch surfing and I was working in retail, but couldn't afford to live anywhere. And so, yes, have I spent overnights on a train before? Like I sure have. Have I gotten myself clean for class in a Nordstrom bathroom? Like, yeah, so there's that element of like, okay, well, I'm right here today. And I woke up, and that's a gift that not everybody gets. And I would give myself a certain amount of time to feel sorry for myself, and then a certain amount of time to be like, but now I have to make it mean something. And so I have had that period of insecurity of I have lost absolutely everything, and I am relying on the kindness of other people to give me a place to sleep, or to allow me to eat, or to give me grace when I am showing up and I just can't get it together, and I can't show up and be professional, and I can't participate in this class right now, and I can't go to that engagement because I don't have it. And so in 2020, when I was laid off along with thousands and thousands and thousands of other people across the world because of COVID, it was that same feeling that revisited again of, oh my God, am I going to lose everything again? Because to your point, it was, I'm the sole breadwinner. We had just spent our nest egg at the time on our house and renovating it. So there wasn't anything in savings. And we had this huge mortgage for a house in Lincoln Park. And we had a 2-year-old. And as the primary breadwinner, I was like, oh my God, I don't have anybody that I can call if I can't pay my bills. And how am I going to get a job that was paying what I was making? I mean, I was a multi-time President's Club winner at Glassdoor. I was making great money. I was comfortable. I was buying Chanel bags. Like it really, and then you're like, oh my God, it's all going to come crashing down again. This is it. This is the moment where I go back there. And what I had to tell myself was, but I made it through that one time. And if I lose everything, if I lose my house, if I lose my job, if I lose my clothes and all of my nice things, like I'm still here. And I have to think that if I could get through the hardest moments of my life in my 20s, then I can also get through this. And so what is the next thing that I do right now? Like in the next 5 minutes, and you figure out, what am I going to do in the next 5 minutes? Okay. What am I going to do in the next 5 hours? Okay. What am I going to do in the next 5 days? What am I going to do in the next 5 weeks? And you just break it into those moments. And some of that is going to be, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps, blah, blah, and some of that's going to be like, I'm going to go cry in the shower, because I need to do that right now. I need to like go cry in the shower and feel really sorry for myself. I need to vent to somebody. I need to tell someone how I am feeling. I need to live in fear for a moment. But then you're going to have moments also where you're like, no, I got this, and it's going to be okay. Because if it's not okay, it's not the end.
It's unbelievable to even imagine having to go through something like that in college and kind of having a life turned upside down. And I think we have opportunities to take something like that and make it count, or to have it be something that can completely set our life on a totally different trajectory, for the negative. And so what's really remarkable, and again, I think, you being the founder of this company, having a degree of resiliency, but also perspective. At the end of the day, we're not talking life and death. We're talking business. We're talking building, really amazing technology that is going to really positively impact a lot of people's lives. It's going to help companies bring their visions to life. But you also bring a healthy perspective when facing the inevitable headwinds that will come in scaling a business and in growth phases of a business, that you know how to move through those, and nothing will be harder than what you've already been through. And I think that is, such an incredible perspective to have in a founder and CEO that is building out a company.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, that just seems like such a perfect way to kind of end this conversation, because I think what you're doing, the already early impact and success and traction that you're seeing, the rapid adoption of your customers who started with a pilot and have already come back wanting to 5x the number of seats that they have on. It's very exciting, and really excited to see, as you're entering this phase of fundraising and talking to investors, being able to put some real money behind this to really help you continue going about solving for the problem and getting this into the hands of more and more users. So thank you, Christina, for being here and being on Invested.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Invested, where we spotlight female founders and their investable ventures. If you'd like to learn more about today's startup, be sure to go to our show notes to find the best ways to connect.